But now that we're really, really interacting, really participating, really working with these AI models, it's super important that everyone participates and gets their voice heard. So like, getting out to vote, if you were talking about democracy, it was more like get out and use this. And if you get something that you don't like, or if you see something amazing that you like about your experience, share it, right?
Welcome back to another episode of Heja Framtiden, the Swedish podcast on the future. My name is Christian von Essen. I'm sitting here in my studio in Stockholm together with Korey, Stegared-Pace. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me in such a cozy studio. I don't know, this is an audio experience you won't be able to see, but I'll do my best to describe it. It seems like a sophisticated kitchen, but a podcast studio as well.
Yeah, it used to be a flower shop, so
nice.
It has that kind of vibe. And you are a cloud advocate at Microsoft in Stockholm.
Yes.
What is a cloud advocate? What does a cloud advocate do?
Yeah, that's a good question. I get that question a lot, and I struggle not to answer it, but that my answer always changes because I do a lot of thinking about what I do. And mainly my job is to, educate and energize developers around not only just building with Microsoft technology, but building in general, whether we're talking about web development, working with AI, many different programming languages. One, getting them started if they need to. So we have this idea of rising developers where people who are maybe even just transitioning from one technology to another, its core, as they say in the new skill set, is to be able to learn skills quickly and be curious. And I kind of give that to them through content of technical workshops, blogs, hopefully appearing on podcasts like this as well to kind of speak the good words of the world of tech. But yeah, that's my goal, is to really educate and energize people who want to become developers and people who are developers now.
Yeah, and we met in December at an event called Sustainable Futures, hosted by Futurize, and I co-hosted it as well. And you were a panelist there. I don't remember exactly the topic, but the whole idea of the day was to combine sustainable transition with digital transition in a way, right? Or transformation. But how did you end up in your role today? Because you come from a long background of customer service and sales, stuff like that, right? And
yes.
Then you went into tech when you moved to Stockholm. Was that the case?
Yeah, so I've always kind of been in technology as long as I can remember, as far as coding and development and just being around computers. But I took a kind of a weird career turn where when I was studying in university, I studied in the US, being American. Studying in the US is quite expensive, right? And you want to make sure that you get the best bang for your buck, if you will. So instead of studying something I already knew, so I started with computer science, and not to brag or anything, but I knew maybe 80% of the course content before, just from courses in high school. So why pay so much and to also then just get in a degree, a piece of paper to validate that you know what you already know? So I decided to take a turn and actually studied rhetoric, or public communications. And that after was really great because, one, giving the ability to speak is probably in the long tail how I kind of ended up here and why I'm here today, even on a podcast. But also just learning something completely new. I would never had a chance to learn now, or maybe I would struggle to find time to learn because I'd be so just dedicated to just doing development work, computer science, programming, things like that. So yeah, I took a long tail back into tech, but I've always kind of been into tech. And like you mentioned, I've done some variety of different roles. I started my journey back into tech in New York, doing integration work for a translations technology company, and then transitioned there to Stockholm, and then started my journey here in the tech scene of Stockholm as well, which I really like.
Yeah, because you've been at Klarna, right? Fintech company, and then Pelterion, which is an AI company.
Yeah.
Now sold to King.
Yes, sold to King, yes.
The gaming company. And then Microsoft in 2020 or something?
It's been a year almost, so yeah. So 2022.
And you're also involved in something called Stockholm Machine Learning Club.
Yeah.
And now that's part of Microsoft Reactor, or?
It's separate things.
Separate things.
Okay. But probably how I ended up in this role at Microsoft has to do with my work it's a its own community, really kind of welcoming and helping, again, education side of things, but making AI and machine learning approachable for people who want to learn.
Okay, so it's mainly for developers?
It doesn't have to be. It was actually our first meeting was so interesting and why I kind of got involved. We had a meeting and it was just like welcoming everyone, as you do as like a meetup or community, and kind of open apply, no agenda, nothing to specifically talk about. There's no like workshop or something. And we had everyone from a high school student to UI designer to myself who was working at Klarna at the time. So doing kind of system development, web development, and then also people who were working in the space, data scientists, machine learning engineers. So it was like a just grab bag of, not to say random, but almost everyone under the sun, all interested in learning AI and ML, and that kind of magical experience you don't get that much often. You tend to have specialist workshops or maybe generalist workshops, but they don't really touch on deep topics, if you will. So I found that kind of incredible, and running that group kind of led me into the whole community space here in Stockholm.
And we still have meetups regularly, right?
Yeah, no, we've taken a bit of a pause, to be honest, largely because my work with the reactor has kind of superseded that. I do meetups and workshops with them, working as an employee of Microsoft. So that's been a bit tricky, but yeah, hopefully we'll start back up again.
This episode is brought to you by Futurize, a consultancy agency based in Finland and big in countries like UK, Germany, and Sweden. They work with digital transformation and sustainable transformation, and they provide their clients with strategy work, design, software development, and implementation. So they have a kind of collaborative approach where they have access to hundreds of their experts all across Europe, and they can combine teams that fit the client's project perfectly. They also produce events. Sustainable Futures premiered in December 2022, where Korey and I were attending. This will be an annual event, hopefully, and they have other smaller events coming up during the year. So check out their LinkedIn profile for more information about that. To learn more about their services and the company culture, check out futurize.com for more information. Really interesting company. Thank you so much, Futurize, for sponsoring Heja Framtid. Yeah, but it's interesting that we connected at this time because, that you're sitting here today is very interesting because Microsoft and AI is two very explosive topics at the moment. So we're going to try to release this episode as fast as possible.
Got it.
Because in 2 weeks' time, it will be irrelevant again. But if we zoom out, why is this AI revolution happening right now, would you say?
Well, that's a good question. I think what was interesting when I was working at Peltarian as well, we talked about the kind of tools evolution of AI. So AI and ML, it was very inaccessible at times for anyone that, even if you were working as a developer or a non-developer, it was a very specialized study. And things got progressively better, the models that we were using, training. And once you want to apply those to actually use cases, you need to build tools to make that possible for other people to use, right? So I think that got a lot more people involved in this space that I think traditionally weren't doing that kind of work. And you can see that big push even with Microsoft now, where not only are we integrating and making it accessible from a technical perspective, but integrating into our products. So I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about this stuff, but the Microsoft Office suite now all has, co-pilots integrated in there. So I think it's just really making that technology better is why I think most people are getting far more excited on that kind of stuff.
And Microsoft first invested in OpenAI in 2019. And I think many people were a bit surprised that Microsoft took this leading role now. But it seems like the company has been sort of planning behind the scenes for a while. Were you even a bit surprised that this happened at this pace?
Wow. Definitely surprised on how fast it's gone. I probably, to be honest, only know a week before the public on most of some of these announcements and things like that. And also Microsoft is a very giant machine. So even if you're a part of that machine, you might not see, the arm, or you're part of the leg part of it, if you will. Yeah. So even that stuff, I get, questions when Microsoft announces something. And even if I'm reading the press releases almost as a normal person would. So yeah, it's been very surprising. And also how quickly we've got it integrated into our products as well to give some value to customers and stuff.
So how would you describe natural language, a model like GPT-3 and now GPT-4? What is it initially and what is the evolution of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the simplest, it might not capture all of the essence, if you will, of GPT, but it is around predicting the next word. These large language models, that's what they're doing. But I think sometimes a lot of people go straight to it's just smart autocomplete. Which is also not necessarily the case. I mean, it's taking in consideration everything that's being typed, and it has access to everything that has been typed. So to give you an example, I mean, I'm sure your intros are much the same every time, right? So, and you say it every time. That takes time. I mean, it only takes 30 seconds or 10 seconds, whatnot. But, a large language model can understand that's what you're going to say. And, even with now the tools that we have can also, emulate your voice. So you don't ever have to say those intros again. I think that's pretty incredible. And it's just, again, being able to understand the context of those things in a way that I don't think language models in the past have been able to do.
And now, what's the most revolutionizing thing about GPT-4, would you say? Because it's rolling out as we speak.
Yeah, it is. So I guess for most people, the most exciting thing is that it can also interpret images. So you can take an image and understand what's in that image and also apply that to what's the context. So I found one of the most interesting use cases was one of those taking like memes. Again, everyone kind of had their own kind of cultural interpretation of why it's funny or not funny. But GPT-4 can actually feed that image and explain why this is funny. So again, what's incredible from a user perspective is that, okay, maybe you can interpret images and understand what's in those images and give some assignment or value to them. But from a technology perspective, it also allows us to communicate with these models better. So before, when we had GPT-3, we were only kind of typing text, and we had this whole skill of prompting, which is basically how we communicate with the model. And prompting to get the best results has to be very specific. So you'll probably see a lot of people on LinkedIn post, I asked ChatGPT this or that. And to get the best results, you have to actually be very specific, get details, maybe even examples, even sample outputs. So sample things that you might want to see to get really good at prompting or talking to GPT-3. With images, now we can also add that into the prompt. So we have basically two chances to talk to the model and get things that we want.
Yeah, I think for many people, the most jaw-dropping example in the presentation when GPT-4 was launched was a napkin sketch of a website, which he uploaded as a photo, as an image to the GPT-4 engine, and it could produce code for a website that looked like that.
No, it's pretty impressive, yes.
Yeah, so that was for me, truly revolutionizing for your community with the developers.
Our approach, I guess, if I could talk about the whole sort of developer community, is like, how do we use these tools to be more efficient? And I think there's, quite a lot of approaches to this, whether it's going to replace someone or make them more productive. And I like that many of the development community has approached it in a way to make us more productive. And maybe we secretly don't like our jobs as much as you think, or it's because we know that there's more to our jobs than just actually the typing of the code, but also understanding the approach and architecture.
Speaking of job losses versus productivity, do you think in general there's too much focus on the negative aspects of this AI revolution, or do you think it's positive that we have this kind of scrutiny and questioning these new tools?
I think there is definitely too focus on the job part of it. I don't think there will be many jobs in the very short term that will be completely replaced by these large language models, GPT 3, 4, 5 in the future, I'm sure. I do think I try to stay away from broad predictions, even though I made a quick one there. But if we understand how these models work and incorporate them in our workflow, I think for most people in working space, we'll find that these models will make working more enjoyable. We just talk about copilots, like we have the GitHub Copilot built into the code editor of VS Code. And I mean, it makes coding fun again, is what many of the reviews say, right? So instead of worrying about, I will never be a developer anymore in 5 years, we won't need those. how can I enjoy my time now, right? Maybe it's too philosophical and enjoy, every day like it's your last. But, I think that is quite critical because one of these things is that these models, they need, especially when we build interfaces and tools around them, feedback. So if you're hesitant on using something like this because you think it's going to, make you unemployable, then we lose the feedback that you might be able to provide.
Yeah, and can also provide more strategic work and creative work instead of just being stuck in coding, I guess.
Yeah, I think the strategy part is the biggest. I mean, the biggest part of even being a developer is not how to code it, if you will, but what to code. So that what is still a very struggle for these models to answer.
And can you say something about the new Copilot rollout that's happening now inside Microsoft Office products, for example?
Yeah, sure. I just not even stepping back of Microsoft employee. I just love the idea of Copilot. I think I don't know who made it up, but it's probably the greatest branding of what these tools can do for us. And that's essentially directing us into the direction we're already heading, but giving us insights and information. So my favorite one, or the one I think is most impactful in many different ways, is the Teams integration. So essentially being able to provide notes within the team call, who said what, provide insights, not just a transcript, which I think when we talked about maybe AI 5 years ago, that was really cool, right? We can just transcribe things and then maybe we can provide some analysis on who's speaking and how long they're speaking. But using GPT-4, we can actually get pure analysis. So, hey, now we don't have to attend every single meeting if we don't need to. So that's a plus. But also, hey, everything that is said is kind of committed to, this, and the model knows that you made this promise that, you're going to deliver something next week, for example, and you can't get around that anymore. But I think that's going to be a really exciting space for people to be, again, more productive in a way that, I think our work weeks look now kind of crazy most of the time. How can we, make that a little bit less?
Yeah, and it's interesting to see it incorporated into Microsoft Word and Excel as well. And also in the Bing search engine. That's what I was trying when you came in through the door. So it's really democratizing the technology in a way. And I think when we've been talking about this topic for the past 5 years, who could have known that this would be so accessible in 2023?
Yeah.
That everyone would talk about it all the time. AI is, in the headlines at every magazine in the world. And just a few years ago, I was being told, do not use AI in the headline because people don't read it. They're just scared.
Yeah, that makes sense.
They don't even click the link. Yeah. And now it's everywhere. It's almost like when people have compared it to the invention of electricity. And now we're finally here. And it kind of feels that way.
Yeah, I mean, I like that word democratizing AI. Ever since I've been in this space, we probably have said that in different stages. But I think, if you look at actually what democracy is as a government structure is participation, right? Voting and selecting. And I think what's interesting now is that now we are, as users of these products, participating with the AI. We're actually producing something after that, right? And I think, maybe a few years ago, we said, oh, we're going to democratize AI, but it was like to build AI models and things like that, which again, maybe you had to build the model first with maybe some tool sets, and then you get the results that you want, which is hard for most people to digest or do daily. But now we have these tools that are already kind of enabled in our workflow, and we can participate and use them to get what we want. So making it much more accessible, like you said.
How do you make the connection between AI and sustainability? Because when you talk about products and tools that will make the world a better place, what exactly do you see ahead now?
Yeah, well, it's sort of like the phones I relate to, like mobile phones. We had at the beginning very big mobile phones, largely because there was a hardware restraint. Like we needed to have these things, but the phones got really small and really thin, right? And that's what we thought everything would go towards, is like the smallest phone. And in the same way, we have these large language models that are giant in terms of both the parameters and the resources that it needs to train those things on. I don't have any of those stats on the top of my head, but anyone in that space will probably know, the equivalent of, a flight to China is the training for one of these models, for example. And now we are actually seeing another push to making these models smaller, but still perform in similar or same fashion. And that is very interesting to me because now we're also seeing in the world of, Twitter and people posting what they're learning, people also training these models on like their computers, right? Like on an Apple computer or something like that. So that's also super interesting because now we're getting to the smaller, more efficient models. And from a sustainability standpoint, that's probably where the direction that we should head towards. And I think, as we develop and towards testing and put these benchmarks in place is where I think the industry should be heading to.
But you're talking about emissions from the actual computing phase, right?
Exactly, yeah.
I'm just thinking more like ahead, how we can use AI for sustainability purposes.
Okay, yeah. I mean, that's another great use case. The insights and stuff that some of these models can give us, even just from a general data perspective. And I think when we talk about sustainability in that side of how do we track the data, understand it, what we're doing, the impact it's gathering, these models can also help us to get the analysis and those insights quicker. And maybe not necessarily non-biased, but in a way that we can present and, make our companies and everything that we do a little bit more sustainable, I think.
And now everyone's talking about an AI arms race, and Microsoft got the lead in a way because of the collaboration with the OpenAI. Do you think that this is a good development, that we see a really fast transition and evolution in the AI space from different actors? Or do you also feel that it could be a risk of releasing premature solutions?
Well, the arms race is that's a tough question. I don't like that term just because we always go to military things. And I don't think anyone's necessarily at war. But for me, as both a employee and as a user of these products, right, the innovation is so fast. But if we are pushing each other as a company to establish both the products, the process, and also the responsibility layer of those things, that's also going to be, I think, pushing us into a better direction if we kind of kept these models ourselves, our products ourselves, and then we kind of waited for the right moment, wherever that might be. So we can see in the press, anytime any of these companies, Microsoft included, make any type of mistakes, that gets talked about.
Yeah.
And I don't think we would have that pressure as a company or even as a product to be able to adapt as quickly as we have without that. So the release schedule and comparing products and something like that, I think is just only pushing us to innovate better technology, but in a sustainable way as well.
Yeah, it feels like the fall is much higher. I mean, it's like when a self-driving Tesla car crashes, it gets headlines all over the world.
Yeah.
When thousands of other manually driven cars are crashing every day.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same now. I got this really weird response from ChatGPT.
Copy and paste to LinkedIn, right? Let them know.
And then it gets headlines all over the world.
Sure.
While millions are not getting weird responses and they are probably using it in an efficient manner. Do you think that's sort of this initial phase that everyone's a bit scared and trying to find flaws?
Yeah, I don't think it's any fear, I think for most people at least, of using these. It might be a confusion on how to use them, but from any of my social feeds, it seems like people are very happy to use it in almost any type of use case, whether it's designed that way, like, again, maybe a co-pilot structure, or not designed that way, like looking for financial or relationship advice, right? So I think it's really excitement. And I think going back to your past question, like how do we keep that excitement? Because we can turn that energy and that excitement into results meaning how to make these models better. So in a way, I think it's really nice that people are excited and posting things, even if the AI makes mistakes, because largely that's just going to be improving the process and the products further on in the future.
Yeah, probably. But the whole discussion of sentient AI or a general AI in the future, do you think those discussions are relevant or are they far too early?
I don't talk about AGI. I'll tell you, I'll leave it at that on that side. Largely because I do think it's a distraction to, again, how can we make these models and these products valuable now and what people are doing with that? Is it something that could happen? Of course. But I am far less qualified to make those predictions and not in the roots of the research to say that. Could it happen by accident? Also a fear maybe some people have. that could happen. But again, if we're talking about handling what we have now responsibly, which I think should be the focus, then it won't happen in the ways that maybe many people fear.
Yeah. And how can we make sure that we reach some kind of AI human alignment? Because that's a job that needs to start right now, right? Or it has started already, of course. But making sure that trolls don't get to dictate responses and create biases in the language models, for example. Are there ways you know of that this is handled, or is it a gradual process all the time?
Yeah, I mean, one of the main things I'm a big fan of when we're talking about these models and monitoring outputs as well is to gather as many humans as possible. So, I mean, that's me saying diversity in the weirdest way possible. But yeah, as many humans as possible as far as, dictating the human experience. Because like you said, there's a human-machine alignment, but the human part is tough to define. The machine part, not so hard. So even when we're looking at the responses and the output that these models having, are they erasing certain groups? How would someone reading that be affected if they were of a certain background? And where is this output necessarily coming from? And for me, I also think that the lowest hanging fruit, but the most effective, is like how the human-computer interaction is designed, so that when we do get bad outputs or demeaning outputs, how do we, one, give the feedback to the model, feedback to the person who owns the model, and also regulate or attract the emotions of that person that got that output? So I think it's just really building tools in place, but again, gathering as many humans as possible in this process.
I suppose it's also important to get young people on board with AI development and using these tools in their everyday lives as well. Are you sort of working with that as well, advocating for younger people?
Yeah, I mean, young, old, sick, anyone who's interested, I will talk to for at least 20 minutes. Because like I said, it's super important to get as many people involved in this as much as possible. Again, to the democratizing AI, I think in the past, you could be a data point in an AI model, not know it. But now that we're really, really interacting, really participating, really working with these AI models, it's super important that everyone participates and gets their voice heard. So like, getting out to vote, if you were talking about democracy, it was more like get out and use this. And if you get something that you don't like, or if you see something amazing that you like about your experience, share it, right?
And if you were 18, 20 today, what would you study?
Well, I'm really offended not assuming I'm 18 or 20 now. But I mean, I wouldn't change anything about what I studied. And I would continue to study what I studied, which was rhetoric, which is really kind of the study of how we talk about certain things, because it touches philosophy. Like philosophy is a way we talk about life. So instead of just studying philosophy, how philosophers talked in the past, because a lot of this stuff, there's a lot of parallels to how this is affecting society. And you can even go back to science fiction. Like I took a course on the rhetoric of pop culture, but you can have the rhetoric of sci-fi, right? And deep down, how has, this person positioned society versus machines, for example. And I think that's going to be really important. Also, I think there's going to be a lot of legal discussions around these models in the future. And again, having that kind of meta top perspective will be effective for anyone who wants to enter this space. So you don't necessarily need to do a computer science degree or programming. It's helpful technically, but if you really want to be involved, maybe even looking in that area.
Yeah, you can basically come from a psychology side or design side or
definitely
philosophy, law, business.
Yeah, I mean, I think...
And add AI.
Yeah. Well, it's a bit like, a few years ago when it was like, I'm the internet lawyer or I'm an internet designer. And that kind of got you the extra 10% above people who are just designers, if you will. So if you're an AI designer or an AI lawyer, not a lawyer that is AI or whatever, but something like that, I think having those niche or specialized skills, but then applying that perspective to AI is going to be super important going forward.
I usually ask, what is your best tip for making the world a better place in the future?
Yeah, this is not original, but I think the start with why from Simon Sinek is a very good way to do anything intentionally. And I think the world needs more intentional people. So whenever you're doing something like, why am I doing this? Like, why am I a cloud advocate? Well, I like it because I like educating people, right? So I just focus on how do I get better at educating people? And that's my why. And that has some good effects, hopefully, in educating people. So start with why. Always ask that whenever you're doing something job-wise, life-wise, like, why are we doing this? And get 2 or 3 points and then become a master at those 2 or 3 points.
Okay, so you're saying that you don't necessarily have a goal, but you have a direction.
Exactly. And then my direction is to get better at those certain areas, the why, right? And then, that helps the world, I think, because you have people who are driven by certain things.
Happier.
Yeah, I mean, it's ups and downs, right?
Hopefully happier. You have a good reading tip or a podcast tip?
Well, I mean, this would be where I would plug my own podcast if I still had it running, but yeah.
The Makers Show.
Yeah, The Makers. I'll go ahead and plug that because hopefully we'll reboot that. But The Makers are Maikers. So trying to be a little bit clever on putting AI in makers. Really was focused on kind of telling the story of builders working with AI. So people building products or services. Because at that time, and still so much now, even though I'm working at Microsoft, people thought that AI work was very inaccessible for building things. It's only the big tech giants, Microsoft, Google, Facebook, Meta, whatever, and also, or universities, right? Those are the only 2 people that can actually build something cool with AI. And there's tons of people, if you go on Twitter, just doing really cool and amazing stuff that doesn't get publicly talked about. So it really just being a platform for people to chat about that.
Let's hope you...
Yeah, this is now the commitment.
Yeah, exactly.
This is good.
The AI is writing it down.
Yeah, 100%.
Who do you think I should interview?
Oh, wow. I'm going to say my colleague just because I'm a good colleague. I have only one colleague here in Stockholm, but Erica, she's kind of the program management side of my technical side of things, so organizing. And I think her skill set is interesting because it's, okay, how do you bring all these people like me and maybe other groups together? And I think that if I go to my earlier answers around how we get more people, more involved, more humans, being able to bring multiple people, different skill sets, backgrounds is important. So digging deep into that and finding how she does it and how she would recommend other people to do it is important. Yeah.
And when we talk about AI superpowers, is another military term.
Yeah, nice.
Sorry about that. It's all.
This is going to get deeper and deeper.
No, it's often the US and China. Nobody really knows what's happening in Russia.
Nothing completely, but that's my bias.
And the EU is kind of lagging behind, but still this part of the world is maybe more focused on regulations and ethical AI. What do you think Sweden and Stockholm can bring to the table in this development now that you've been here a few years?
Yeah, I do think the regulation and involvement as a society, again, from an outsider perspective, Swedish society is kind of trying to build on good systems in place. You can see it if you've been here for at least 2 years. There's always the bureaucracy. If it works for you, works really well. And that's because good system design. And I think good system design is super important within AI for building systems around responsibility, sustainability. And so being that voice, and I think even not only just being the voice on that, like government-wise, legal-wise, but also there's amazing tech talent here and highly intelligent people involved in the technical part as well. That's just an amazing contribution to have both of those kind of things, and to the point of bringing people together. Like some of these people work, across the street from one another, right? Sweden is small comparatively, but that could be used as an advantage because now we don't have so much space between us physically and I guess productive work-wise that maybe other countries have, where the regulation happens in DC and all of the cool tech happens in Silicon Valley, right? And there's all this space in between, right? Here it's kind of all happening in 3 or 4 cities. No offense, but right? So it's really great that you can kind of have an event or community and have all those people involved together.
Yeah, that's really true. So how do we get in touch with you?
Probably the easiest, find me on Twitter. That's Korey Space. So Korey space. So Stegared-Pace, but using that. On Twitter and on LinkedIn, you can just search me Korey Stegared-Pace. I'm usually posting and talking about things in those places.
Okay. And should people get involved in Microsoft Reactor in Stockholm?
Definitely. If you are, I'm going to call a technically curious person. So even if you've never done anything technology development, we're a space for you. Or if you're working as a developer and you want to learn something new, we're a space for you. So definitely.
That's like 3,666 members or something.
I used to check daily, but now once we crack 3,000, I stopped counting. But yeah, thank you for
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's great community.
Great. Thank you so much, Korey Stegared-Pace.
Thanks for having me.
And hopefully we'll see you again at the next Sustainable Futures event.
I hope so. If I'm invited again.
Yeah, yeah, I hope so too. Hejaframtiden.se for more information about the podcast, my previous guests, books, lectures, magazines, newsletters, etc. Most of it is in Swedish, but there are 60 plus episodes in English. My name is Christian von Essen. Thank you so much for listening. See you again next time.